How's everybody today? Welcome back to another fly tying tutorial here at Spawn Fly Fish. My name is Pete and I am a material junkie. And then for anybody that's a surprise, again, welcome to Spawn Fly Fish. Today we are going to tie one of my favorite flies, a chum fry. It's that time of year. Chum fry are hatching in the rivers and they are starting to out-migrate, leaving the fresh water, heading toward the saltwater goodness. And the cutthroat, specifically the searun coastal cutthroat, absolutely are keyed in on these little delicious meals. So let's get into it. A little different hook for you today. This is a jig hook, and this is a 3x long jig hook from Montana Fly Company. So this is the MFC 3x long 60-degree jig hook. The number that they use is the 7322, and this is a size 8. For the bead, I've got a Spawn football bead here in silver, and the size is 7mm, and then I've got 6 wraps of .025 lead-free wire just to keep everything in place. I have quite a bit going on here in this fly. It's not very difficult by any means. It's super simple. Just a lot going to be happening in a short amount of time, so please bear with me. Got some threads just started there. Some 6/0 in olive. 140 would absolutely work. Black would work. Whatever you got handy is probably good enough. Alright. And yes, I am in love with Ahrex hooks and all that, and I tie almost all my flies on Ahrex hooks. But again, we've announced that we're going to start carrying some more MFC products. Got into some of these hooks just to look at them, and this is ideal. One thing I'm looking for here is a little bit extra length in that shank, so the 3XL of course makes sense. But a lot of times when you get into 3XL, specifically jig style hooks, they're not always going to have the biggest hook gap. I need that hook gap. Otherwise, I'm just not going to utilize that hook. It's not going to give me confidence, and then I'm going to fish it less and less, and then it's not the hook, right? You have to find another one. Well, I can tell you right now, this hook is the bomb. It's amazing. Huge hook gap, super strong, and I think it's going to have a lot of play, especially for the searun cutthroat fishing that we're into. Alright, so at this point I'm going to get some flash going here as a tail, and this is lateral scale in the 1/69th of an inch cut, so it's very small. Amazing product. And one thing I do want to stress here, we're not tying a big bait fish. This is a chum fry, very small. If you've ever seen these in the water in person, they're tiny. They're very thin. There's nothing to them, and yet those cutthroat know it's an easy chunk of protein, a little fat mixed in, especially the ones that still have a little bit of egg yolk on them and all that good stuff. What a tasty meal! If you're a fish that's, it's eat or die, well, this is the smorgasbord, the buffet, whatever you want to call it. So you see I've got a bunch of that tied in. I'm just going to guesstimate for now my length, and then that'll sort of set up the entire length for the rest of the fly as well. Nothing wrong with that. Alright, so doing a rib here on this body. Nothing crazy. I've got some soft wire from Uni, and this is black in the size small. By all means you could go a little beefier. And again, it's just whatever you got on hand. That's what we're going to use. And in the sake of keeping that underbody as even as possible, I'm going to start that wire all the way up against those weighted wire wraps. And then at least the underside, because again, the hook is jig oriented. Because of that, we're just going to, again, keep in mind, even underbody. So if we tie everything in up at the front and then wrap all the way back, well, you're kind of building an even underbody as you go. Next element I'm going to tie in, this is Scud back, and this is the 1/8 inch cut in clear. Nothing fancy. All we're trying to do is build the strongest possible fly here, right? We expect it to get chewed on and eaten. Well, then treat it as such, meaning make it as tough as you possibly can. You don't want to be switching flies every fish or two. You want to You want to be fishing until, you know, you've caught 10 or 12 of these things and they shred that fly, and then you got to switch. That's a great problem to have. So let's get this thread advanced. There's a little bit of that scud back right there. I can see just a tiny little nip, hopefully. There we go. And then our next element will flatten that out even more. So now, sticking with the lateral scale, I've got the regular cut here, Opal. I love this stuff. It gives off so much shine and shimmer, and of course I'm a fan for that shimmery stuff. I play with these fish too much, you start thinking like them, and you kind of want to eat the food they're eating sometimes too. Maybe it's just me. Alright, so this one I want to tie in over the front, going out over the eye. And the reason being, I'm going to double wrap and make sure I have extremely full coverage of that shiny underbody inside of that scud back. And one more thing to completely, again, strengthen every part I can. I've got some super glue gel. I'm just going to get in and give a little bit of a kiss here and smear all the way up and down those thread wraps. I don't want a bunch of this stuff sticking out, just a little bit. I'm going to wipe off some excess there. Call it good. Now let's grab that lateral scale and just start wrapping her back. And the beauty of this too is if you miss a wrap, you're going to catch it on the way up. Right? So this is angled slightly as I go, and you see it's not perfect by any means. It's not the perfect touching wrap. It's not the slightly overlap. It's just get it as much coverage as you can without fussing too much. Make sure you're getting all the way back on that one. That's the key. Cover up any of those thread wraps we laid down, and then simply reverse and start heading back up, and you will see I will have full coverage at the end of this, and that's great. That's what we want. A lot of color bouncing off of this stuff underwater, and that's perfect. We need to get that fish's attention in a quick manner, and then the other part of this is it has to look realistic enough to those chum fry to just make them commit without a second thought. Fun little side note, last year we got into a situation on one of our rivers and tons and tons of these chum fry out migrating to the point where if you've ever seen fish too full to commit and attack a fly, we got to witness it. It was pretty cool. Very frustrating, but it was cool. And if you didn't put an exact imitation right in front of their noses, they were not going to move more than half a foot to get that food. Just unbelievable. They were just gorging themselves on these chum fry. Gotta have them. You know, if you're fishing for searun, coastal cutthroat, this is one of those flies. We talk a lot about, they're not so picky. It's how you move the fly, all that. There are times and they get keyed in on a food source, and I would say chum fry are definitely one of those. So make sure you have a nice number of chum fry tied up. Nip that, and now we're going to add to the strength one more time, and also to that realistic factor by adding in our little par marks, if you will. And so this rib will kind of do double duty. Yes, it's going to strengthen our fly quite a bit. Make sure even those little teeth that are getting on that thin skin aren't going to disrupt anything. Great. However, if you look now, we went from a boring, stagnated, flashy body to something with some attitude and a little character by adding that rib. So, not always the case that it has multiple purposes, but sometimes we're fortunate and we can get by with it. We'll take advantage anytime we can. Got my dedicated wire cutting scissor there. I'm just going to bend that wire back ever so slightly. There's our tail, there's our body, looking good so far. So now we kind of have to switch this up and get on this underside just for a hot minute. This won't take long, as they say. Alright, I do have some amber polar chenille here, and I just got a little piece that is from a previous fly that I tied, and I don't need a bunch of this stuff, but I am going to come in underneath here and this will act again as another trigger, a little flash agent, all that good stuff. But I'm going to use this also as a reminder for some of these fish. They are definitely used to seeing these chum fries. Some of them are going to hatch a little early, and they'll have a bit of that egg sac, if you will, still attached underneath. And that's all I'm doing right here is kind of giving that representation. That color though, that amber, this is very common to see in these chum fry. And I'm just going to trim that down about like so. I don't want a bunch of this coming off here. Again, this is just a little reminder for those fish. All right, so now we're on the biz side. I might want to adjust that camera. Give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to adjust that and drop it down so you guys can see what I'm doing. That looks a little bit better, at least it does to me. Just a couple more elements to add in here, and this fly will be pretty close to finished. I do have a proper mess going on, as you can probably hear on the side. I've got all kinds of materials. Again, I said I'm a material junkie. I wasn't lying. Let me get a couple feathers out here, and we'll be ready once we get to that point. For our next element, though, I do have some spawn dub, and this is Chum Fry from our Salish Sea collection in Mega. And if you take a close look there, you'll see how some of that grabs that amber color. All right, we've kind of got some of that built in there. You don't have to know all the secrets. You just have to know that when we make this stuff, we design it to work. All right, I'm going to restack some of these fibers just a bit. And what I want is for this underwing, if you will, or this dorsal element to reach almost the entire back. But instead of just measuring and tying in, I'm going to tie it in over the eye, that portion that I want to keep. And then I'll fold this back over and see where I'm at, and see that it's quite a ways off. I can go in a lot deeper than that. So I'll restack my fibers, give myself a little more strength. And I don't need much here. Again, these chum fry are small and sparse. Don't go beefy on them. They don't need to see all that. That's not what they're looking for. So now we're going to have almost a half and half veil. So tie it in just about center, and then get her tied down. Bring those fibers back and split them around the hook point. And if you really need to be picky, do it from the top and then bring it up like so. Great. Call that good. And then, if you remember, the last fly we did utilized this Buggerbou. This is the mini Buggerbou barred olive. It's brown barred olive. This is what I'm going to use for the final topper. And yes, it's going to continue that segmentation that we added to the body, which is key, especially in these early stages. Those par marks, if you will, or barring, it's pretty substantial. It's significant. It's noticeable, and so we want to keep all those very noticeable elements incorporated as much as we can. Again, just for recognition of a prey item. And so typically, yes, this would be barred black maybe, but I love this stuff, and it's got a very natural soft look to it, if you will, in that color scheme. And so I'm just going to lay a chunk of this right on top like so. And the only thing I want to do here is make sure that all my Buggerbou is staying on top. Clean separation there. Make sure we're not tying those butts down if we don't have to. And then pull down with our thread once we've got it situated. Looks pretty good. Let me get this thread right in front now, and we can safely trim out our butt ends. We're almost done with this fly. Told you there's a lot going on, but it's very simple. Nothing crazy. You've done all these techniques 100 times before, maybe not in this specific order. All right. Do have a little bit of water here in a container. I'm just going to get my fingertips wet and slick back all these materials. So now you see that little bit of polar chenille does a lot under the underside there. It's given that little egg yolk sort of nod, if you will. And then let's just go ahead and whip finish this guy. And I got one more thing to really bring this thing to life. There's our whip finish. And we are going to be using some resin today. So I don't need to do multiple whip finishes. Getting in a good cut there. And now, I told you, let's bring this bad boy to life. So I've got some eyes here. And these are silver black 4mm eyes from Spawn. And by all means, if you've got eyes at home and that 4mm, even 6mm would work on something this size. Do you need it? Right? That's one of the fun questions we get to ask ourselves all the time as fly tires that take our art, if you will, or our craft sometimes too seriously. By all means, if you don't want to put eyes on there, don't put eyes on there. It's such an individual thing. Subjectivity. To me, I like eyeballs. Again, I am a fan of anything that acts as another trigger and gives me another chance at hooking an extra fish or catching that tougher to catch fish, whatever it might be. That's my jam. I like that. I like that puzzle. I like that challenge. Not everybody does. I understand, and I can appreciate that. So, eyes, no eyes. I can tell you this. This fly will catch fish. Now I'm going to come in off camera here, and I'm going to use some flow. I'm not going thin, going flow. I don't want a lot of resin on this head, so I'll just give two layers, cover those eyes, cure it up really well, and it's time to go fishing. Once I have about 20 of these in my box, you won't see me on camera for a couple days because I will be busy in the river tormenting those cutthroat. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, by all means, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe, and we will see you all on the water.